find this gospel reading familiar in a few different ways. One of them is that a portion of the reading is one of the gospels that our prayer book sets aside for funerals, for burial services. And then the other thing that always comes to my mind is how much, by contrast, how much fun it is to let kids, in particular, act out this gospel reading. The comedy, almost, of the idea of somebody getting to shamble out all wrapped up in bandages, no longer dead, but alive. But today I actually find myself somewhere in the middle. Because if we jump straight ahead to Lazarus coming back out of the tomb, I think we miss something so important. First off, I admit, as I so often do, I should say, I find myself wanting to climb inside Jesus' head a little bit and ask some questions. What exactly motivates him when he first gets the news that Lazarus is sick? To delay. Because I can't help always reading that gospel reading this way, that he gets the news that his good friend Lazarus is sick, and whatever his motivations, he decides it's not yet time to leave. And he waits long enough that the first misunderstanding comes. He tells his disciples that their friend Lazarus is sleeping, and he is going to wake Lazarus, and they all agree, okay, Lazarus is asleep. And Jesus has to say, no, I mean Lazarus is dead. Because whatever the reason is that he stayed in that place where he was when he found the news, he has been there long enough that Lazarus is no longer sick, but dead. And I so wish I knew why. And I know that's because when I don't rush to the comedy and the joy of Lazarus coming out of the tomb, I can see more clearly the pain and the frustration of Mary and Martha. And it feels so real to me. Because when Jesus reaches Bethany, their brother has been dead for 4 days. And because it was the custom of their people and their place, but really still their people today, he is already in the tomb. There is no waiting. They haven't waited for all the right people to assemble. They can't. They have to put him in the tomb, and he is gone. There's a practical aspect, yes. Mary and Martha are women in a time and a place where a woman's livelihood and her peace of mind came from having some kind of male protector. And in the absence, it seems, of any husbands, because they all share a house, their brother was their protector. And he is gone. What will happen to them? And the pain, even more than that, of losing a beloved brother. One with whom they still made their life. And the sure and certain knowledge that both of them hold that if Jesus had just come right away, if he could somehow have gotten there before Lazarus died, then maybe they would never have had to put their brother into that tomb. It's not quite funny to me anymore when Martha says to Jesus, I wish you had been here. And Jesus says, you know that I bring resurrection. And she says, yes, I know. On the last day we will rise up and we will be with God, not knowing that Jesus actually means I am about to call your brother from the tomb. Doesn't strike me as words of comfort. I wish again I could ask Jesus, why couldn't you have told her more plainly? Or why couldn't you simply have offered her words of comfort? But I'm persuaded, after reading and rereading this gospel, after being gifted, it felt like, with a set of Sunday musings from an author, Diana Butler Bass, I think she's onto something. She wrote about this gospel for this morning that maybe some of the comfort needed to come not from Jesus, but from the community. Because there's this beautiful detail in the midst of this story that so far is full of delays and double meaning conversations and a complete lack of comfort. Lazarus is dead and he is in the tomb, but Mary and Martha are not alone. It was and is still a Jewish custom to come and be with people who have lost someone they love. And Mary and Martha are surrounded by their community. It's no accident that there are people there to also say, Jesus, surely you could have saved Lazarus. People to believe and people to be a little bit skeptical even when Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, because they have come to be with these sisters. They have made sure that in these first, most acute days of loss, that Mary and Martha are not alone. They don't need to depend only on each other. And then, I can't help but feel it's like Jesus finally gets what's going on, because after both sisters have come, one after the other, to ask their questions, their painful and I think angry and so sincere questions. Why weren't you here? Jesus doesn't rush to calling Lazarus back out of the tomb. He is so stirred, so moved. It turns out he feels so deeply what has been happening that he weeps. Mary and Martha and Lazarus were Jesus' friends. There's actually scholarship that suggests that their place, their house in Bethany, was a safe house for Jesus. And he might have been several times when the pressure was too strong, when too many people were trying to kill him. He found his own comfort and shelter with these three siblings. He knows them, he cares about them. He too weeps for the loss of Lazarus, for the pain of death. Because even though Jesus already is planning to call Lazarus from the tomb, he knows that there has been separation, and that the separation hurts. It turns out, the way that all of us are wired, there's not that much difference between somebody moving away and someone dying in the way that we react. We know the pain of the physical separation, of not being able to see someone. That's why it can be hard to say goodbye when someone has come for a visit, because they are going and you don't know exactly when you're going to see them next. And it hurts so deeply when we believe someone is gone forever. Maybe Jesus is also crying because he knows what is coming for himself, too. In John, Jesus seems the most farsighted, the most aware of all the pieces in play at any given time, and maybe he knows already that by calling Lazarus out of the tomb, he will set in motion his own death. And even though resurrection will follow, it will hurt to be on that cross. It will hurt to be beaten and whipped and questioned beforehand. And maybe Jesus is crying too, because he knows that even though he will conquer the worst pain and separation of death, the sense of continued separation from God with his resurrection, he cannot undo all of the pain of losing someone. Yes, he is resurrection and he is life, as he tells Martha, an abundant life. But abundant life still seems to mean the pain of loss. Jesus weeps. And then he calls Lazarus from the tomb. Then abundant life becomes more visible. Not because it was wrong to mourn, but maybe because it was so right to mourn. That only the pain of the loss of Lazarus could show just how profound it was to have Lazarus back. To see Lazarus in a few more chapters reclined next to Jesus at a meal. To know, looking forward, that for all the joy of Easter, we need the pain and the sorrow of the cross. Like Mary and Martha, I'm happy to say, we are a community. And one of the gifts of community here and now, just as much as it was in Bethany in Jesus' time, is the way that we can hold each other. Absolutely, we can celebrate together. Thank you for singing happy birthday to Lynn and I. And we can be there for each other when we hurt as well. We can perhaps offer an echo of what Jesus said on a mountaintop. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Because we can hold each other. Because even in the midst of Lent, we are still Easter people. We know that the end of the story is not Mary and Martha standing and asking, why weren't you here? And we know the end of the story is not Jesus' arrest or his death. If we continue to hold each other, if we continue to be present through pain and sorrow, we will find joy. And soon we will find Easter. Amen.